For decades, the Beatles have been remembered as a symbol of friendship, creativity, and unity for young men who changed the world with their music. But behind the scenes, their relationships were far more complicated than fans ever realized. While John, Paul, George, and Ringo presented a united front to the public, tensions often simmered beneath the surface. And one of the most surprising rivalries of all was between George Harrison and a man who, it turns out, utterly hated him. After years of speculation, the truth has finally come out, and it's more heartbreaking than anyone expected. George Harrison, the quiet Beatle, was known for his humility and deep spirituality. He rarely engaged in public feuds and often avoided the spotlight, but his calm exterior sometimes clashed with others in the music world, even with those close to him. Many fans assume the biggest tensions in the Beatles were between John Lennon and Paul McCartney, but insiders have long whispered about another hidden conflict, one that grew quietly over time until it exploded. The man who reportedly hated George Harrison more than anyone was Eric Clapton, one of his closest friends and, for a time, his rival in both love and music. The two shared a bond that began in the late 1960s when Clapton played lead guitar on Harrison's classic, While My Guitar Gently Weeps. They respected each other deeply as musicians, but that respect was soon tested by something far more personal, a love triangle that would leave both men scarred for life. At the heart of the rift was Pattie Boyd, George Harrison's stunning wife and muse. Pattie had inspired some of his most beautiful songs, including Something, which Frank Sinatra once called the greatest love song ever written. But behind closed doors, their marriage was struggling. George's growing devotion to meditation and spirituality, combined with the pressures of fame, left Pattie feeling lonely and neglected. During that difficult time, she found comfort in an unexpected place: George's best friend, Eric Clapton. Clapton fell deeply in love with Pattie and began to pursue her relentlessly, even though she was still married to Harrison. His obsession inspired one of rock's greatest love songs, Layla, a desperate cry for a love he couldn't have. When George discovered what was happening, he was furious, not just hurt by the betrayal, but by who it came from. It wasn't just another man, one insider said. It was his best friend. Their friendship disintegrated almost overnight. Harrison felt humiliated and betrayed, and Clapton, consumed by guilt and heartbreak, spiraled into drug addiction. For years, the two men barely spoke. Friends who knew them during that period described an unspoken hatred, not the kind that comes from pure anger, but the kind that grows from deep pain. George reportedly refused to discuss Clapton in interviews and avoided public events where he might run into him. Clapton, meanwhile, was racked with remorse, later admitting that he had crossed an unforgivable line. In a shocking twist, however, time eventually softened the bitterness between them. By the late 1970s, Harrison and Clapton began to reconcile. In an almost unbelievable act of grace, George forgave both Clapton and Pattie, who eventually married Clapton in 1979. "It's weird, but we're still friends," George said years later. "It's just love. You can't own people." Still, those close to Harrison say the scars never fully healed. George forgave, one friend explained, but he never forgot. While he was a spiritual man who believed in peace and karma, the betrayal had changed how he saw friendship and trust forever. When George Harrison passed away in 2001, Eric Clapton was one of the pallbearers at his memorial, a moment that brought their story full circle. Clapton later helped organize the concert for George in his honor, describing it as the most important performance of my life. Tears filled his eyes as he played the same guitar they had once shared during their youth, proof that, despite everything, love had somehow outlasted hate. So, why did Eric Clapton once utterly hate George Harrison? The truth is complicated. It wasn't hatred in the ordinary sense. It was the kind born from love, jealousy, and regret. Two men bound by music and divided by emotion, both victims of the same powerful force that had inspired their greatest songs.